Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Security Expo podcast. And our guest today is Sarina Persall. Sarina is a veteran of the security industry with over 30 years experience. She started her journey in security working in nightclubs part-time and managed to work her way through a range of different positions, eventually ending up in the role of Director of Security at Crown Melbourne before moving on to Head of Business Resilience and then effectively finishing up with Crown as the Executive General Manager of Organisational Resilience. Sarina has a wealth of experience and knowledge, and so I thought it would be great to get her on the podcast and tap her brain and find out a little bit about her journey and some of the lessons that we can learn from her experiences over the last 30 years. Sarina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So it's an interesting journey from having worked part-time in nightclubs to ending up as Executive General Manager of Organisational Resilience at one of the largest casino and resort chains in Australia. Walk me through that. How did you end up in the security industry?
An accident, like a lot of people, I think, more and more I'm learning, definitely an accident. I had wanted to be a nurse growing up. Didn't do that. Essentially, I accidentally fell into security when I was living up in Far North Queensland before licensing was a thing. I probably saw some behaviours in a bar I was working at that didn't align to my values, shall we say, and I challenged the owner on that. And he told me if I thought I knew better, I should have a go all by myself and left me to it for the rest of the weekend.
Wow.
So that was a very steep learning curve. I can't say that I followed the same rules we work by now. But essentially they didn't have an issue all weekend and I quite enjoyed the work. And then from there, I just kept getting tapped on the shoulder to go and give people a hand and help them out at different clubs, shows, bits and pieces. And I quite liked it. And essentially it was the job I was doing while I tried to work out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And, and then it turned out to be what I do while I grow up. Or while I'm growing up. So yeah, it was a very accidental journey. And obviously, as I said, up in Far North Queensland, we didn't even have licensing back then.
Yep.
And when I moved back to Melbourne, licensing had just come in. So I went and did my security license with, it was Tony Zalewski's company. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
I do remember the company. Yes,
usually on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did my security license with Tony. There was a bunch of Army commandos in the course with me that kind of took me under their wing. Because I was the only girl in the training at the time. And
that wasn't Julian Diamond by any chance, was it?
Sorry?
That wasn't Julian Diamond by any chance, was it?
No, it wasn't. No,
Okay.
no, it was a little crew of three of them.
Yep.
They all still work aligned but different fields. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was how I got into security. And then, like I said, I had my children quite young, so it was a really good career for me. Again, quite accidental. Didn't think it was my job, but certainly as a young mum, instead of having my kids in childcare, I worked weekend nights at nightclubs. I got paid very, very well. And I could be at home with my kids all week and they could be home with their dad on the weekend night. So it really worked from a lifestyle perspective. So really, like I said, it was very organic. That's how that happened. And then my first proper role, which was with New Breed Security. That came about from, back in, you'd remember New Breed Security. So that was with New Breed, and Patrick Prendergast, who was the owner, was working at a concert I was working, and I kept pulling him up because he never had his pass showing and harassing him a little bit. And he finally said, "You can't work for me."
Yep.
That's how I ended up working in a corporate role.
Well, I think his brother Brendan ended up running the Crowd Controllers Association of Australia for a long time.
He did. That was when I was at New Breed when that all kicked off.
Yep.
And he did, definitely. And I still have a pretty close relationship with Pat and do the odd thing. So, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So then how does one go from being a part-time worker in nightclubs to Director of Security at Crown Casino?
Being very lucky. I talk often about that, the value of advocacy and that organic sponsorship. I was very lucky. Pat was... I shouldn't just say lucky. I worked really hard. Really, really hard. And Patrick was very, very supportive and made sure that he really pushed me when I doubted myself. Through that journey, New Breed was looking at supporting Crown. This was a long, long time ago, in some potentially putting New Breed into Crown for a period of time, or just backfill the security. And through that journey, I got to know Craig Walsh, who was the Director of Security at the time.
Yep.
And similarly, we'd gotten to know each other a little bit through that process of meetings. I was doing a little bit of CPP work through Annie Peacock.
Yep.
looking after Shane Warne and people like that. So she'd wheel me into Crown to do things. And just through that exposure and doing work in the environment, Craig eventually tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, there's this role going at Crown. And that was the operations manager role. I really think you should look at applying. I've never had a gimme role. I had to apply. I had to go through the process, but then I did end up in Crown. And again, Craig was a big advocate. I was lucky that I had someone who saw talent and probably quite a unique skill set that some of my male peers didn't have, that could add value to this operation.
Yep.
And that's how I landed at Crown. I was very grateful I landed at Crown. It was an excellent career move.
Now, back at the days when you're talking about Crown, you've sort of dated yourself a little bit by talking about the introduction of licensing and working at New Breed. So I'm going to make a leap of faith here and say this is back when Crown was in the original building and probably not that old. So Crown was Australia's, or Victoria's at least, first major casino, and we were kind of building the rocket ship on the launch pad and learning as we were going. Tell us a little bit about that role, because that must have been a very eye-opening role for you at the time.
So it will help you with dates there, because the New Breed time frame was quite lengthy. So it was into the new building was when I came in. So I actually worked the opening night, but again, that wasn't for Crown or New Breed at the time. I went in and did the Mercury Lounge for Mark Padinsky back in the day for a period of time for another company called Aces. You probably know of Aces out in Sydney.
Yes, I know Aces.
Yeah, so I did that for a while. So yeah, I launched into the new Crown because New Breed was probably 12 years worth of time and festivals and big day outs and all the greenfield sites. So I got into Crown, I think it was about 2011. I haven't got my LinkedIn friends around there, but certainly the thing I enjoyed about working at Crown was they really took security. We talked earlier. They took security very seriously. And they were willing to invest in the security team. And I really, really enjoyed that because in private sector, where you're the contractor and you're doing a show that lasts a week, the ability to really invest in your people is really tricky. At Crown, we redesigned training. We had 6 days of training. We debrief. We got debrief. We do very formal briefing sessions before every shift. And I really enjoyed leveling up the professionalism of the team in that environment. That really excited me, and I got a lot of I could see the value in it and the outcomes. There was a lot of change, but they were up for it, which was exciting because again, private sector, it was very difficult to get change. People wanted security to meet a requirement for their liquor license. And they wanted you to fix it when it went wrong. I like stopping things from happening. That's probably what I like doing better than let's just wait until it goes wrong and we'll wheel out the big units to fix it. I'd rather stop things from going wrong.
Now, in the US, they typically in casinos will often separate director of security from director of surveillance. Is it a similar sort of thing here in Australia?
It was when we first started. And then I think a couple of, maybe a year or 2 years into my time at Crown, we merged security and surveillance. So we merged the leadership. However, they still sat as two smaller departments underneath. And they've since been separated again in the last few years. So I think like most industries, there's ebbs and flows. We try things, we see how it goes. We sometimes move back or adjust or meet something in the middle, similar with the resilience role that I picked up. The reason I landed across it, the business resilience piece was the organisation decided to put a separate focus on recovery and emergency and crisis management. And being that I was part of the security team that used to own it, I took that across and then looked at that across the group to align the group.
Okay. So going back a few steps, again, I'm going to make an assumption here, and if I'm wrong, set me straight. But given that you were sort of in there around 2011 through to 2000 and what does it say here, up until 2024, you were probably there during the transition from analog to digital video. Walk me through that process, because was that a business case that you had to build and then present to the board as a security department, or was that just something they saw as a natural, necessary evolution?
So that was living under surveillance when that all occurred. So I didn't have huge I can certainly give you the lady's name who was quite involved in that, who'd be excellent for you to speak to. So I would say it's a natural evolution of how the world is turning it. And even now, anyone with analog cameras is really turning over digital, just from a functionality perspective. So I think it was just, and also a sheer number, but I couldn't speak to that because that was very much a surveillance department. And certainly at that time, I was very elbows deep in security officers training and protective security
Yeah. So was that the
business.
majority or the bulk of your role at the time, just sort of managing the training of the new people coming in, the operational efficiency of the people that were
Yep.
there and dealing with the incidents that occurred?
Correct. And the ongoing training. Yeah, absolutely. We had about 460 odd securities. That's a decent sized team. And like I said, we spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of time on training and enhancement always.
Yeah.
And I love it. And there's a whole training department there. So yeah.
Yeah. So from your perspective, having spent a number of years dealing with that and dealing with such a sizable team, what were one or two of the big takeaways from you that you sort of said, look, if I ever had to take on this role ever again, these are the things that I would tell anyone they must know or must do.
Be nice.
Yeah.
I think, and I learned that when I got to Newbury, I find a lot of people in our industry set the bar very low. They don't think very highly of security. They set the bar low and then they get annoyed when that's as far as the security officers perform.
Yeah.
So I'm a believer in raising the bar, giving people the training and the support to meet the standard, and focusing on ongoing improvement. I find a lot of people look at security. I had an experience really recently where someone did a review and they went and found fault in something and they were, well, there was an issue there. And I said, well, have you looked at the overall performance? We only focus on the 2%. Like you and I, none of us are at 110%, 100% of the time. We're just not.
Yeah.
So if you're going to walk around and find that 2%, and I'm not saying we should accept the 2%, we should always, but we should be looking at the holistic level of performance and how we could always improve.
Yeah.
When we did debriefs with the team, I set a standard with the team, which didn't go down very well at the beginning. They were never allowed to leave a debrief until they could point out something they could have done better.
Yeah.
Never. I don't care how good it was. And I said, the day you don't think you could have done something better is the day you're in the wrong job. So we used to talk about all the improvements. We would absolutely, give each other a pat on the back when it was done very, very well and very professionally, but they would have to find me at least one thing. And it just made them think differently. So that's one of my things. So I think we have to stop focusing on the 2% of the industry, the performance is bad because we feel like we need to find something wrong. Look at overall performance and ways to always improve and be kind. They're security officers are people. We're doing a kind of tough job. There's sometimes really boring. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes they're just having a bad day and don't want to be standing on their feet for 12 hours. For all those reasons, get to know your team. I always have been very, and I think because I was boots on the ground, I like to lead from the front. I like to, there's nothing I would ask someone to do that I haven't or wouldn't do myself or wouldn't stand next to them doing still today at this age, which is starting to get on. I was told to act my age this week in the job. That would be that's one of my key things is you invest in your people and the rest of your job's quite easy.
Yeah, and it's not just investing financially, it's investing emotionally and mentally as well,
Absolutely.
isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of people tend to forget that security is very much a customer-focused, customer-facing job, and emotions are the most contagious thing on the planet, more contagious than any influenza you can possibly imagine. So as their senior leader, if you're in a bad emotional state or you're angry or you're pissed off about things, they're going to catch that and they're going to display that to everyone else that your team deals with.
And I think also investing in the teamwork. So at all the jobs I've done, including in the current role that I'm doing now, you have to teach your team to trust each other enough to be able to call that out because as a senior leader, you're not always going to be there.
Yep.
But when one of the team members sees someone who's suddenly getting a bit heightened or more easily aggravated than they should or potentially aggravating the situation just because of their reaction, intentional or unintentional, you have to have the kind of teamwork where equals can tap each other out as well and really control those emotions because you're right, emotions are everything. And it is a highly emotive job often. So that teamwork amongst the team, I think, is incredibly important. And like I said, I'm a big fan of kindness. Just you've got to be nice to people. And that's from the officer's perspective as well. So when they're dealing with their customers, it has to be kindness. I had a leadership group that I worked with once and they were all very, very alpha males. They were all ex-military, ex-police.
Yep.
And we went through a phase where we tried something and I said every single decision they made, they had to talk me back to a point of kindness.
Yep.
They didn't, again, it felt like sometimes people feel like I'm crazy. But it did work. And if that was terminating someone's employment, if it didn't matter what it was, talk me back to the point where that decision was made from a really positive place. I think when you start from a positive place, the end results are always better.
Yeah, and I imagine, and I could be wrong, so again, correct me if I am, but I
Yeah.
imagine security in a casino environment is a slightly different animal to security in pretty much any other environment. Because if you're working at a pub or a club, you're dealing with people who may be intoxicated, but that's probably about as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
When you're working at a concert, you may have people who are overly heightened or excited or dehydrated or whatever the
Mm,
case may be. You might be
mm,
working at a major event where there's a protest and people have got a burning grudge against something. But in a casino, and it's not just Crown, it's every casino, and I'm
mm,
not suggesting it's the casino's fault.
mm,
You're dealing with people who are sometimes, probably more frequently than we'd care to admit,
mm.
making devastating, life-altering choices that can have long-term consequences and impacts on the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And security has to deal with that.
I would suggest we actually didn't have to a lot, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I think all the environments are different. Where
Yep.
Crown is over and above I go back to training every day of the week. The
Mhm.
training and the support, the numbers and I think I'm mindful not to talk too much about the casino, but there
Yep.
is huge support systems in place at the casino.
Yep.
So it isn't just the security. There's the responsible gaming guys there. We had Father James there forever.
Yep.
There's a really layered approach to what you're talking about.
Okay.
There's an incredibly layered approach to how that's made. So security in itself is very focused on probably everything else, and they're really proactive. We were out there looking for, yeah, probably a bit tricky. So I can't go into great
No,
detail
and I
about
don't want you to either. Yeah.
about a lot of things,
Yeah.
but I was always very, very proud of the very proactive work we did to care for people. And care for our customers and our staff, the kind of support and welfare stuff we did for the employees. There's a lot of employees work there. And I think I got to feel it more there because it was 24/7 and it was the same team. Whereas, like I said, we did that at concerts, but it's high turnover. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're going through, you don't have the same 460 staff. You have a different 460 staff for every show. So it's a very, very different environment and much harder to embed training and relationships and
Yeah.
layered approaches. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you moved from that role into head of business resilience. How
Yep.
did that happen and what did that involve?
That was our head of risk at the time, kind of developed the role, and she and I were speaking about it and how it could be applied to the business. And the end result of that one was very similar. She kind of said, "Oh, I think I want you to do the role. Will you apply for it?" And that's kind of so similar. I think that's been a theme through my career. I've not really been very deliberate in
Yep.
my career choices. However, it have worked. So, and again, very fortunate that people have seen something that would apply just to fill a need. And again, because the idea of business recovery, emergency crisis management did live in security as the business was restructuring, that's when I thought it was moving. But also I just thought it was time. I'd done security at Crown for some time and I really wanted to stretch myself. I don't, as I said, I'm a career security girl. I don't have a policing or military background like most peers at my level. So I did want to start creating for myself a point of difference from a career perspective. If
Yep.
there's only so long, I'll call myself an old lady now. I'm not quite an old lady, but I'm getting there. There's only so long you can still be the head of, the physical security. And I really want
Yep.
to stretch and learn and have a point of difference. And I felt like that was a great opportunity to do that.
Yep.
And start to get into an area of business that is quite different and emerging and developing, which it absolutely was. And I think resilience as a function still is.
Yep.
And resilience being that, it is security, it is cyber, it's a holistic response. And I love holistic response. I don't think any of it's ever one person's problem.
Yeah.
Just solve. So that's how I landed in that role. So I went from a very, very large team to literally just myself and then slowly built that back up to, I think it was about 6 people when I finished up there.
Yep.
It's a very, very different way of working. It's very challenging.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot and I really enjoyed it. And hence why now the business I've set up is very much in the resilience space where it's holistic, security reviews, but from a much more holistic lens.
Yep. So resilience and crisis response must have been a fairly interesting role, especially again at a casino. And we're not talking about Crown in particular. But I mean, there are going to be those phone calls that you get at, 11 o'clock on a Saturday night where you've got 2 ways to respond to it. You can either go, oh shit, and hide under your desk until the Overton cycle rolls the news over into the next window and hopefully everyone's forgotten about it. Or you can view it as, here's my chance to pull open the shirt and the superhero uniform is on underneath, and it's like, it's my time to shine. I'm going to step up here and show everyone why I do this job.
Yeah.
I'm guessing most people want to hide under the desk. Tell me about your experience.
I definitely don't like hiding under the desk. It's funny, I was doing a course and the section I couldn't cover off was full community recovery, because I haven't had a full blown what the criteria would create as a full blown crisis to recover from. And I said it just seems really morbid to then be wanting something really bad to happen so I can have the Superman moment to get this. It was just a really weird thing for me. So no, I don't like hiding under the desk. I've been very lucky that I haven't been exposed to too many. I've certainly had plenty over the years from, like I said, back from New Breed days, and again, even consulting with a few clients now in relation to their crisis response. But again, I go back to teamwork and working as one unit. I love training that stuff.
Yeah.
I love exercising it and it not being scary, because if you can make it, we go back to some fundamentals of training. If you make it fun and engaging, people are going to remember that more, and they're going to hold on to that little bit of muscle memory that will help them all react better.
Yep.
In those times. And I think that's where the value is. I just spoke to actually an old colleague who's not working at the moment. They're having some issues around break-ins in their street. And we're just talking about that idea of practicing your response. She's really concerned. She's putting cameras up outside her house. And so we're talking about, well, what would happen if someone got in? Because she wouldn't know. And I said, just think about work. You need to practice that stuff.
Yeah.
You need to know what you're going to do, because if there's someone in your house, you don't want to be thinking about it then. You don't want to wait to that moment. I said, it's exactly the same as what we do at work. Just practice it so it's somewhat comfortable. It's still not going to feel good when it's going to happen, but at least you've got some idea, and that muscle memory hopefully kicks in. And certainly from a corporate environment, the teamwork thing for me is everything. If everyone's pulling in the same direction, half the battle's won.
Yeah. And did you find that at the time, as head of sort of resilience and crisis communications, were security and legal aligned? Because I find that often when you talk about this sort of stuff, and we don't have to go into the details of it because you weren't involved at the time, you're in a different role, but there was, everyone remembers that there was a positional asphyxia incident, at a casino in Australia a while ago. And that's a challenging environment for anyone to have to deal with. And sometimes you get this disconnect where legal are saying, shut up, don't say anything, just don't admit liability, don't admit responsibility, don't do anything. And from a crisis communications point of view, you're like, no, we need to get out in front of this and explain what we're doing and how we're doing it differently and what happened. Did you have that disconnect, or was everyone reasonably aligned?
Very aligned.
Right.
Very aligned. And I think that comes back to everyone works very closely together, and we practice things and we talk openly as well. Yeah, very aligned. And I found that as a theme through most of my career. And I have to say, I don't tend to stay places or work with people. We talked earlier about some CPP work, you and I. And, I've worked for some really interesting people. And some of those people I've only even worked for once. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
They're not bad people. They're just not people I want to put myself in harm's way for.
Yeah.
So, I'm very values driven. If I don't feel like the work is aligned to my personal values and what I need to feel at the end of the day, then I don't stay there very long.
Sure. And then you eventually moved on in 2023 to Executive General Manager of Organisational Resilience. Mm-hmm. How did that role differ from the Head of Business Resilience?
That one was very much about looping in. So that's more the converged space. That was looping in cyber. So it was looping in the cyber work, and obviously cyber is a huge threat everywhere right now.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of working quite closely with the cyber CX team, who I think are just exceptional. So that was very much looping in the cyber concerns into the full structure, and I guess giving it the focus and attention it needed in the current climate of that risk in of a world, not just in that particular business.
Yeah. And obviously that's a major challenge for every organisation at the moment, is sort of trying to unify that once very siloed approach to physical security and cyber security. If you had to try and distill it down into sort of, one or two aha moments, what would you suggest are your sort of, big key learnings from that role that you would say to others in a similar position? this is what I found really useful.
Don't get overwhelmed by cyber guys. And I say that with respect. It's a different language. And I think sometimes people get really caught up in feeling like they don't know enough about cyber. You don't have to know enough about cyber. Cyber guys know a lot about cyber. They're really good at it. It's about trying to understand what their intent and what the end outcomes are. It's about understanding your business really well to frankly know what happens when you can't touch any of your technology. That's the resilience.
Yeah.
When it's not working, now what? So what? What are we going to
Yeah.
do about that? What are the risks to the business? What are the risks to our people? So I think don't get frightened of cyber language. I've spoken to a few people lately who are quite scared of it. I can say it's actually not that scary. The cyber guys are good at it. You just have to spend some time, like any good relationship with a positive work outcome, spend some time getting to know them and understanding them. And you need to have some understanding, but don't get too caught up in the fact it's very technical and they speak a different language.
Yeah.
That would be my one big one for that. And then finding ways in any organisation to get them on board, because everyone has their own business objectives right now. I've looked at a hospital, a university. I've had some really interesting jobs lately, and it's interesting that we've got the exact same challenges. Very different organisations, but their challenges are the same. And so if you think about a hospital, you've got doctors and nurses trying to save lives, and now I'm going to come and annoy you with my business continuity plan.
Yeah.
So where does that sit in the grand scheme of what they're trying to achieve that day? So the other big thing I think is finding ways to do as much as you can for them, so you're not too much of an impost on the business. It's trying to save lives, earn the money, whatever their core objectives are. How do you get them engaged in your work? Because it has to be done. It's really important work, but I understand why it's difficult for some people to get engaged in it. So I think you have to make it fun. You have to make it fun, and you have to be able to demonstrate the value, and you have to make it as easy as you can. I think a lot of people overcomplicate things to seem really clever.
Yeah.
And I think that's very unwise.
Yeah. Do you find it's necessary to keep reminding both sides of the equation, the physical and cyber, that they rely on each other? Because, I mean, if I take cyber as an example, I can have the greatest firewalls, I can have the greatest antivirus, I can have the greatest zero trust network under the sun. But if someone walks into my server room and just physically removes the rack, or the unit out of the rack and walks off with it, none of that matters. So they still need physical security.
Absolutely. And just the awareness. And again, how do you make it interesting? I've had a great meeting last week with a council, and he told me a story about how they had some pen testing, and they wandered in, he left a USB on the in the canteen.
Yep.
It's not a canteen, it's like a coffee room, a lunch space, and it just had photos written on it. So of course a really nice-natured co-workers picked it up to work out whose photos it was to return it to, and that was it. That pen testing was done. I think it was something like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So you have to have the two have to come together, and they have to see the value in each other. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm laughing largely because you're the second person who's given me a USB story in about the last 2 weeks. And, USB drops and social engineering have seriously been going on since probably the early 90s. And the fact that people still fall for this is just mind-boggling.
But even there was one overseas and an international one we looked at. And, similarly, it's to your point, it's humans and under pressure. Someone ran the IT help desk.
Yep.
Impersonated someone else, knew enough about them to be convincing, put a bit of pressure on the poor IT person to reset a password. Done. We're in. Simple. It's not.
I still laugh because you go to major security shows, and ironically, this is a podcast for a large security show. Yeah. And everyone's handing out USBs on their stand that they're going to take back and stick in their computer, and you just think, really? It's like, I remember years ago walking into a security and government conference at the National Convention Centre in Canberra, and one of the main sponsors had created backpacks with all sorts of paraphernalia into them. So you walk into the foyer of the National Convention Centre at Canberra, where every government agency security advisor and senior politician were in attendance, and there's just a sea of backpacks lying all over the floor everywhere. And you're just like, is this really actually happening right now?
That's pretty funny. I like the backpack one. That's hilarious. And hundreds of them probably.
Yeah, literally. And you're just like, I can't even begin to comprehend this. So you've now moved on. You're doing your own thing. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and where we can find you.
I've started up Resilience Advisory Group. So I have decided when I finished up a Crown, I took myself off walking around Europe for a month. That was really fun. And just had a bit of thinking time. My old boss, Frank Walsh, used to say, you need more time just to think, Sarina. You need to clear your calendar and have an hour a week for clear. And very rarely do I have an hour a week for thinking time. So I had a thinking month, and that was really great. And one of the sides, I definitely just I love my industry. It's been a great industry for me. Like I said, it was an accident, but it served me very well. I've had a really lovely career. I've enjoyed myself. I've traveled the world. I've raised my children. Tick, tick, tick. Now what I'd like to do is grab those learnings, and particularly in that resilience space, the much more holistic piece, and work with good people and do good work and enjoy my life.
Fantastic.
Am I asking too much, do you think?
No, I don't think so. If people want to find you, how do they do so?
Right now, it's a really good question because I haven't actually done a website yet, but it's Resilience Advisory Group. But that will be up shortly, and I'll have something on LinkedIn very soon. So Resilience Advisory Group, and like I said, I'm all about proactive, creative solutions. So if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, I'm probably the girl.
Well, Sarina, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great pleasure chatting to you, and we look forward to catching up with you at the Security Show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.